Right now, cleanup crews are on the scene in Alabama after a barge burst into flames. Look at that. On the Mobile River, the Coast Guard saying the flatboat was carrying scrap metal when it ignited and eventually ran aground. Then the blaze died out. No crew members were on board at the time, and no injuries were reported. The cause of the fire is under investigation. Can you imagine seeing that thing come in?
How did a barge full of metal catch fire? I'm just curious.
I don't know. There must have been something smoldering underneath, and then the whole thing just went up.
It's a mystery.
There you go. Maybe we should go investigate.
That's right.
We'll check it out.
Thanks for joining us today.
All right. Outnumbered starts right now.
We begin with a Fox News alert new reaction to President Trump's legal team taking on the special counsel investigation, taking it head on. The newest member of the president's team, Rudy Giuliani, says the president does not have to comply with a potential subpoena from Robert Mueller, adding that he would not let his client walk into a, quote, trap. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here today, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy herself. Co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend, Abby Huntsman. Girl, I haven't seen you in a minute.
So good to be back.
Yay. Republican strategist and senior fellow for the Independent Women's Voice, very independent, Lisa Booth.
That's me.
And in the middle seat today, pounding it out. Go get him, opinion editor and columnist for the Washington Times, Charlie Hurt, about to put a hurtin' on us.
That's right.
I liked the intros today.
Right? I know. I've been out for a little bit. I'm back from a little medical situation. I'm feeling fine.
Well, everyone's busy here. We're happy to have you back.
Thank you, guys.
Looking
I appreciate
good.
that. Ooh, thank you. Well, you're outnumbered.
I am outnumbered, and thank you very much.
You ready?
To be here. Yes, I am.
All right, let's do this. President Trump's legal team taking on a tougher tone to deal with special counsel Robert Mueller. His new attorney, Rudy Giuliani, explaining in an interview why he doesn't want the president to sit down for an interview with Robert Mueller.
Because they're trying to trap. You couldn't put a lawyer on this show who wants to keep his law license to tell you he should testify. They don't have a case on collusion. They don't have a case on obstruction, which is why they're asking all these cockamamie questions about what do you feel, what do you think. I'm going to walk him into a prosecution for perjury.
In that same interview, Giuliani was asked if he believes the president could be forced to testify before a grand jury. Watch what he said.
We don't have to. He's the president of the United States. We can assert the same privileges other presidents have.
Are you confident the president will not take the fifth in this case?
Oh, how can I ever be confident of that?
A short time ago, our own Judge Andrew Napolitano weighed in on Giuliani's legal argument. Watch.
I don't blame him for making that argument. That's his job to make it, and he's been making it very extensively over the weekend. But history shows that presidents, when subpoenaed by grand juries, one way or another, do comply.
Charlie Hurt, what say you?
You know, this whole Rudy Giuliani thing, I keep referring to it as the shock and awe legal strategy, where you just have no idea what, I mean, he is all over the place. But the bottom line is, you know, he is right about one thing. He needs to prevent the president from testifying. You know, if he walks in and sits down under oath with Mueller and his team, it absolutely will be a perjury trap. And I'm sure the president would be delighted to go and talk to him, and because the president always likes to talk. But I think that, it would be very dangerous.
You know what's interesting, Lisa? The president has heard this time and time again. Like, this isn't fresh information. So maybe he gets the credit for looking at this and reading first the political landscape, saying, okay, I'm going to do this, but then listening to those people who are paid to tell him what he should do.
Well, and I think specifically with this, it's the legal landscape that you should be concerned about. I would be less concerned about the political optics of this, because President Trump can always point to the fact this is a witch hunt, right? So I'm not going to sit down with Mueller. I think it does work, because I think we're seeing increased evidence that potentially that's the case, right? Look at even what happened most recently with the less redacted version of the House Intel report, which basically shows that both Comey and McCabe told congressional investigators that they didn't think Flynn lied. Yet, when Mueller took over the investigation, now Flynn pleads guilty to, you know, one count of perjury. So if I'm President Trump, I'm looking at that. And I think if you're just the American people as well, and you're finding out these new pieces of evidence, it doesn't look good for the FBI or the Department of Justice.
You know, Kennedy, when you look at all that's going on in the world, North Korea, so on and so forth, the American public is really astute. They know what's important to them. Is this on that list?
No, it's very interesting because I think Giuliani provides a gift for those who are fans of political theater, because he's another entertaining character. We all know him very well, but we haven't seen him much recently, and it's a different side of Rudy. It's very mercurial. It's rather impulsive, and it is entertaining. And the thing why I don't think long term it's going to be too problematic for the president, because although the press seems to get caught up on some of the tidbits. The press, they're like cats, and cats aren't very smart, and they're easily distracted. And so Rudy's kind of shining flashy objects, and they keep pouncing to different corners of the room, but they never really get the silver mouse, which is fine. But a lot of people realize that the Stormy Daniels thing, it's a big distraction and kind of gross, but maybe not illegal. They want their personal economies to improve. They want world peace. They want things to work out with North Korea. So does the giant distraction benefit the president? That still remains to be seen.
So, Abby, our entire journalism career is reduced to being a couple of shiny object seekers. But I liked it. It was an interesting argument.
Not you two. Well, present company excluded.
But it is an interesting analogy, because you think about those lights running around and the cats following them. And the latest is Rudy Giuliani, and I think the media is jumping on him because he's giving them so much fodder and so much to jump on.
Can I ask you a question, though? Because, I mean, you, through your family, you've been in those moments, and let's face it, everything is a campaign. I mean, even when you're in office, you're still running. So you've got a PR situation going on at 24/7. Is that what this needs?
I've been saying from the beginning, the White House, specifically with the Stormy Daniels story, they've been behind that from the get-go. I think President Trump would so much benefit himself and the team in the White House. They would all benefit from him coming out. He should have come out 2 months ago when this became public and say, here's what happened. Right. I'm not a perfect man. No one voted for me because I was a perfect guy. The Access Hollywood video came out well before the election. So I don't think his base is going to change based on the Stormy Daniels story, but I do think he could help himself and help his team that works for him every day by just being upfront and honest and transparent.
I want to get back to the cats for just a second, because I do think you have a really good point. So Giuliani's response in the Washington Post today, and if we just pop it up, is everybody's reacting to us now. And I feel good about that. Charlie?
Yeah, that's not his job. But I do also think that you raise a very good point. And that is that when you compare this or the Stormy Daniels stuff or any of the other stuff that the media is obsessed with, it, in a weird way, sort of benefits the president in that it gives him, they're not talking about the things that he actually cares about and the things that he's actually getting done. And it kind of gives him a free rein, a free hand to get a lot of stuff done under the radar that the media is not talking about.
Do you think this president is challenged by not getting stuff done? I mean, it's like Niagara with a straw on Friday every week.
Yeah. And
I know that because I'm on every Saturday morning, and it is a
there's so much stuff
and
going
I think
on.
a lot of it has to do with the fact that the media is not paying attention to any of that stuff. Yeah. They're absorbed with Stormy Daniels or whatever, and I think the American people don't really care about those things nearly as much as you say. They care about
and is Stormy Daniels the death of the Republic? No, but she will jiggle for tips.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, it's only Monday.
Just calling him as the scene.
For tips.
Now, tips, T-I-P-S. Meantime, special counsel Robert Mueller's team finding themselves under the spotlight. That's an unfamiliar situation for them. In a stunning rebuke, federal judge T.S. Ellis grilling Mueller's lawyers in open court, questioning their motives. Judge Ellis is overseeing the bank fraud case against former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Judge Ellis telling the Mueller team, quote, "You don't really care about Mr. Manafort's bank fraud. You really care about what information Mr. Manafort can give you that would reflect on Mr. Trump or lead to his prosecution or impeachment or whatever. That's what you're really interested in." Now here's reaction to from a former federal attorney, Joe DeGeneva, who was once considered to be a part of the president's legal team, and Rudy Giuliani. Watch.
I do. I believe that after Judge Ellis's remarks last night, there's no question that the amount of government misconduct is accumulating. I happen to believe it's greater than anybody realizes.
This investigation has now reached a level of bad faith. This is no longer a good faith investigation.
All right, so is this no longer a good faith investigation? And was that federal judge right to call Manafort's team out, or not Manafort's, Mueller's team out, rather.
Yeah, no, I unfortunately, from the beginning, I don't think that this was a good faith investigation. But clearly it wasn't when we started to see some of these charges come out, because, of course, not all the charges against Paul Manafort have absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump or his actions with the campaign. It all has to do with things from the past that okay, and I'm all in favor of prosecuting somebody for anything, breaking laws. But you didn't need a political investigation, special prosecutor, in order to go after these things. These things should have been gone after a long time ago by regular white-collar crime prosecutors.
I think the best line from TSLs, by the way, if you didn't know that federal judge out of Virginia before this last week, you certainly know him now.
Yes.
He said, because he's asking for more evidence from the memo, right? The
He wants
memo.
the actual
He wants
memo.
the scope.
And so he went back to DOJ saying, I need more evidence from the Mueller team. And they're saying, well, we have it. He said, well, let me be the judge of that. I think he may end up being a very big player in this entire thing, because what he's saying is what evidence ultimately led to where we are right now, because this is a real stretch. Here I'm looking at Paul Manafort from bank and tax fraud back from 2005. What does this have to do with Russian collusion today? This is a real stretch, and this is something that the Trump people have been saying for a very long time. But because this judge is not linked to Trump necessarily, he's a Reagan appointee, people are saying maybe we should take this more seriously.
But here's the thing. A lot of people, and because special counsel is operating with a lack of transparency, they're conveniently opaque when they want to be, and so that I was talking to some parents this weekend who happen to be on the left, and they still feel that because of all this, and so much is because of these secret powers, that there's a huge bomb that is going to blow up in the president's face politically and legally.
Well, I think the same could be said potentially for the FBI and the DOJ as well. And to Abby's point, the judge's comment certainly underscores and gives President Trump fodder in saying that this is a witch hunt. And take just a couple examples. Look at Rod Rosenstein, for example. He's the guy who laid out the case for firing James Comey, and then he's the one that appoints a special counsel that gives Mueller this broad authority to look at things like obstruction of justice, for instance, which, again, he's the guy that laid out the case to fire James Comey. Also, look at the fact that we know that James Clapper wanted Comey to sit down and brief President Trump about the dossier, and then that meeting is leaked to the press, right? And we all know James Comey himself was the one that said that the CNN was looking for a news hook to basically publish the dossier because nobody could verify the dossier, including her own intelligence as well, could not verify the dossier. But then they run with the dossier, and then from there on, it's been this rampant in the media about Russia collusion. So how can you look at some of these things and not be concerned objectively, regardless what your position on the president is? That should be deeply concerning to you.
That was like a movie trailer for what's been going on.
But it's true.
Where is Rob?
It's terrifying.
No, but do we know enough about the parameters of this investigation?
No, we don't. I mean, I think that's why Judge Ellis wants to see the memo.
Yeah.
He wants to understand the scope of this investigation. And if the political critics of the president are actually waiting in the wings, hoping that the Manafort investigation can yield an impeachment, what happens when it doesn't?
Right.
Right? There's no accountability for all of the wasted taxpayer money and all of this time and all of the damage that it has done to potentially the office by becoming that shiny object that the media likes, some of them like to focus on.
And the political fallout from going after Paul Manafort, he wasn't a good guy.
No, he wasn't a good guy.
He may be compromised, but is it worth this obsession, this constant obsession that really does take us away?
If he broke the law, then separately, as they are doing now with Michael Cohen and others, then separately go after him. But why keep one case and not the other? I think that's a very fair question.
Yeah, where is Rod Rosenstein, Charlie, and all this? Because he created this scope memo, right, that ultimately led this the evidence led to the investigation.
And we saw just last week, he went very aggressively and said that they will not be extorted, basically accusing his bosses in the White House and in Congress of trying to extort the Department of Justice, which I think is a crime. But
I think extortion in general.
Yes.
Exactly.
I'm stretching
that's a pretty amazing thing to think about.
But to your point, Charlie, it doesn't exactly boost confidence in the DOJ or the FBI, and that is severely lacking right now as we're going into a contentious confirmation for that CIA director position.
You a question, because I watch your show, 8 p.m. Eastern on FBN, and I sometimes will hear you say about where this investigation is. Why do you think it is that we are at a point now where people aren't necessarily waiting or looking at the evidence? They're waiting to be told. Is it because there's been so much focus on this?
Apparently, yes. I mean, and it's gotten to be so problematic and so out of hand and so all-consuming. And I hope everyone steps back and asks themselves, is this the function of an investigative counsel? Is this what we put so much faith and money and time, endless money into special counsel?
And the time is, the clock is ticking, because as we get closer and closer to the midterms, Mueller is about to pull a Comey and wind up being in the middle of an election, still doing this sort of.
I don't even know which part. You mean leak? Like which part of pull a Comey?
Well, specifically, having a huge, major, high-profile investigation in the middle of an election.
Yeah.
We don't want that.
He's trying to get people to flip like gymnasts, and it's just not going to happen. President Trump throwing his full support behind his pick to head the CIA. Just talking about that ahead of her confirmation hearing that's happening Wednesday. Why the White House says Gina Haspel is the victim of another partisan effort to bring down one of the president's nominees. Plus, President Trump accusing former Secretary of State John Kerry of potentially breaking the law after reports Mr. Kerry was meeting secretly with the Iranians in an effort to save that Iran nuke deal. And now, former Secretary Kerry responding.
John Kerry. Not the best negotiator we've ever seen. He never walked away from the table, except to be in that bicycle race.
We are back with a Fox News alert just 48 hours ahead of her critical confirmation hearing. President Trump has come out swinging on behalf of his pick to head the CIA, Gina Haspel. The president tweeting this: "My highly respected nominee for CIA Director, Gina Haspel, has come under fire because she was too tough on terrorists. Think of that. In these very dangerous times, we have the most qualified person, a woman who Democrats want out because she is too tough on terror. Win Gina." Well, this comes after reports that Mrs. Haspel considered withdrawing her name from consideration on Friday. A short time ago, a White House source weighing in on that report, saying Haspel did discuss withdrawing, but she was bouncing her concerns off White House officials who are guiding her through that process. Mrs. Haspel faces stiff criticism from Democrats and some Republicans even for a role in the CIA's enhanced interrogation program. So everyone is talking about Mrs. Haspel right now. Love your take, Kennedy, off the top, because I know you've got opinions about this. People say it's a democracy. President Trump won the election. He should be able to pick the people he wants in these top positions.
Absolutely, and that's what these hearings are for, to really vet these people, get a sense of who they are, and challenge them on their past and present positions, and certainly her personal history. And hiding behind the fact that something that, much of her work history is classified is not enough. There are some very serious questions that need to be raised about those black sites, particularly the one that she oversaw in Thailand. And, two senators whom I think are both very good on civil liberties, Ron Wyden and Rand Paul, have both raised concerns about her. And I really hope that senators take careful time and deliberation, because we have, as we were just talking about in the last block, we have such an erosion of trust in law enforcement and, with the CIA. And we can't just say, she's a woman, she's been there a long time, and that's enough. That's not enough. It doesn't matter who the candidate is. If there are questions about their past, those need to be raised and thoroughly answered.
And be taken to that hearing. This comes, Charlie, just after Admiral Ronnie Jackson, how he was sort of dragged through the mud so publicly. What does it say about where we are right now that you have a lot of these public servants that want to withdraw their name before even being put up for a hearing? It's sad.
Well, of course, Kennedy, you're exactly right, and you raise great questions, and I'd like the answers to all those questions as well. But sadly, I think that you could probably count on one hand the number of Democrats or Republicans in the Senate who actually care about those things and actually want the answers to those questions. The real thing is they just don't like her because Donald Trump nominated her, and they want to do anything that they can to undermine him by stopping her. Obviously, they're not doing it. They haven't yet gone into any of the personal stuff the way we saw with Ronnie Jackson. But I also think that politically speaking, again, setting aside the good questions you raised, politically speaking, this is a great fight for Trump to have, especially when he's in the middle of negotiating with North Korea, talking about Iran, all these major things going on. And this is a great fight for him.
I would say that it is okay for him in your argument to have that, but for the democracy itself, maybe not so much.
Agreed.
We've got open seats of more than 100. You know, I was at the going away event, the Bon Voyage event for the brand new German chancellor, or German ambassador. Boy, what country do I live in?
Rick Grinnell.
Yeah, last night. And he was thanking people for the support because he had waited so long to get confirmed. Yeah. And that I agree with Kennedy. We do need a venue, though, to ask about those black sites. We do need a venue where we can get some thoughtful questions. I don't know if a public hearing is necessarily going to get us where than other public hearings have. But we do need that venue. We do need the vetting. But we need to be able to do this expeditiously. So what Grinnell wants to do when he can, because he's going to be pretty busy right now with Germany and Iran and Korea and all that. So he's going to be pretty busy with that. But when he can, he wants to fight against this concept that everything has to go through the Senate and Congress for confirmation. Can there be some jobs where you can have those thoughtful reviews and not have it be a political fight? I thought it was an interesting
Yeah, well, he would know it well because he's been through it himself.
Yeah.
Lisa, so Sarah Sanders did tweet about this, saying anyone who is fighting for women empowerment, they're hypocrites for saying that Gina Haspel can't go up for a hearing.
I kind of love that. It makes me laugh just because she's using the Democrats' tactics against them because, everything's sexist, racist, homophobic, whatever. If they disagree with you on an issue, they label you as something, horrific and that you're likely not, right? And so I think it's kind of funny to use that against the Democrats. Hey, if you're not going to support the first female CIA director, it's because you're sexist or you don't really believe in women's empowerment. But I think the Trump administration has a strong case to be made here. Look, Gina Haspel's been part of the CIA since 1985, as long as I've been alive and on this earth. She's also had the endorsement of
Boy, Charlie, we
former
feel old.
She also has the support of, basically every individual who's served in the Intelligence Committee, former CIA directors, deputy directors as well. And I do think that if Democrats vote against her, it's more largely for political reasons, not like Kennedy laid out and actually having some real concerns and questions for her. It's political. And we saw that play out with Mike Pompeo when Democrats voted for him for CIA director and then didn't support him as Secretary of State. I mean, come on.
Well, at least have the hearing. I think Kennedy makes great points there. It is going to be on Wednesday, so we'll stay tuned to see what happens there. Coming up on the show, a final push by supporters and critics of the Iran nuclear deal ahead of a critical deadline coming this Saturday. The case the UK's top diplomat is now making to top administration officials during a two-day stop in Washington. Plus, amid the good vibes ahead of a historic summit between President Trump and North Korea's dictator, the rogue nation is now lashing out at the U.S. What is this all about, and whether it puts that meeting in jeopardy?
I won't use the rhetoric now. Now I'm trying to calm it down a little bit. So I'm not going to use the rhetoric.
A Fox News alert now, a last-ditch effort by U.S. allies to influence President Trump ahead of his May 12th deadline to decide whether to keep the U.S. in the Iran nuclear deal. A short time ago, British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson met with new Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And earlier, making his case for the agreement this morning on Fox and Friends Watch.
The president has a legitimate point. He set a challenge for the world. We think that what you can do is be tougher on Iran, address the concerns of the president, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, not junk a deal. Because, as I say, Plan B does not seem to me to be particularly well developed at this stage.
The visit by the UK's top diplomat comes ahead of the May 12th deadline I mentioned for the president to decide whether he will keep the U.S. in the deal. Meanwhile, a top Republican is urging the president to stick with the agreement. Congressman Mac Thornberry chairs the House Armed Services Committee. Watch.
The key question is, okay, now we are where we are. What happens next if the U.S. pulls out? Maybe the best thing is for the president to delay a bit more his deadline of this month and put the French and the British up to the test about whether it is possible to get this other sort of agreement.
Okay, so that's one side of it, Charlie. I mean, you could delay things and you could work on a contingency plan and possibly bring more people in Europe on board. But what do you think about the reports of shadow diplomacy with the former Secretary of State, John Kelly? I mean, does that help our government? Does that help our cause to have him in the back wing saying, no, you got to keep the deal, and I should know?
No, it's absolutely breathtaking. I mean, the idea that, if John Kerry wants to put his oar in the water on all this. Not that he hadn't already, because he came up with the crappy deal to begin with. But if he wants to do that, then why didn't he call up the Secretary of State and he can lobby him? The idea that John Kerry would go behind, secretly negotiate with the leader of a country that wants to annihilate us, remove us from the map of the world, and secretly negotiate with him to undermine U.S. foreign policy, which is now being set by the president. And unlike John Kerry, who tried and failed, Donald Trump ran for president and got elected president, and so he gets to set the policy.
And you know what it makes him? It makes him the Jane Fonda of the Middle East. I'm not even kidding about that.
True.
I mean, there's something about that is so unethical and underhanded. And put politics aside, foreign policy and diplomacy are supposed to be separate from domestic politics. Put that aside, and then you can go ahead.
Don't forget, Donald Trump
in here though with a little back and forth.
But Donald Trump won the election running on this issue. So that's an important thing to remember as well.
So the president tweeted. We know he likes to do that.
No way.
Yeah, he did. The United States does not need John Kerry's possibly illegal shadow diplomacy on the very badly negotiated Iran deal. He was the one that created this mess in the first place. Exclamation point. All right, so they go back and forth. Then John Kerry's spokesperson, very busy. I think every American would want every voice possible urging Iran to remain in compliance with the nuclear agreement that prevented a war. All right, so I want to kind of get my head around the spokesperson's response, though, Lisa, because it's saying two different things. It's not saying stay in the deal. It's also saying, it's not just saying that, but also it averted a war. Talk to me.
Well, and we also know, based on recent intelligence from Israel that came to light, that I think the intelligence community has known about for a while, that the entire deal was basically predicated on a bunch of lies, right? It was built on a bunch of lies from Iran itself. And to Charlie's point, real quick, regarding John Kerry, it is a little hypocritical going back and looking at some of the accusations on Michael Flynn when he was part of an income administration talking about sanctions with the Russian ambassador, which is pretty much standard operating procedure considering the fact he is part of an incoming administration. So there's a lot of hypocrisy on that angle as well.
For example?
But for President Trump, I mean, look, there are three main concerns with the Iran deal right now. It's over the ballistic missiles. It's the verification concerns with the ability to
what exactly they have on the ground.
And it's the sunset clauses as well. And we also know that even President Macron of France, they also share those concerns. The question is, what do we do about it, and can we strengthen the deal?
I don't know if those concerns from Macron, and certainly we know not from, the actual Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel. We certainly know that she wouldn't see it this way. I don't know if those concerns were sincere enough to drive a new deal. Sure, they're there. I would add a fourth, though. We still don't know where they're in the side deals publicly.
That's absolutely right.
You don't know.
You don't know. When it comes to Iran, there are actually no good options. And talking about John Kerry, this is his legacy. The Iran deal is his entire baby. I mean, when you look back on his tenure as Secretary of State, that was the biggest thing that he left behind. So for him, a lot of this is personal. A lot of it is he's nervous that the president's going to end a deal that is all of he can really speak to during that time. And it's ego. The problem is dealing with Iran is so much more than ego. I mean, that Iran, I would argue, is the biggest threat that the United States faces for a number of reasons. And there are no good options on the table. You either need to change the deal, and if the president says he's the negotiator-in-chief, maybe this is a good opportunity for him to practice those negotiating skills.
Well, but how about everybody else? How about those Republicans who were saying, like Thornberry, oh, no, you can't step away from this deal? How about doing a little shadow, deal building?
Well, they also said the same thing about
like Plan B.
I don't know. Internal diplomacy, the kind that is legal and patriotic within the walls of Congress and in the United States.
Just a notepad with some other ideas.
And I know we're about to talk about North Korea, but there are a lot of similarities here. And the biggest issue with Iran is not them having a nuclear weapon. It's having hegemony and having a relationship with North Korea. It's having a stake in Syria.
What they have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's also funding Hezbollah and human rights violations, among other things. And those elements were completely sidelined in the crafting of this deal to the detriment of not only the Middle East, but, world.
But you also have people like Condoleezza Rice, who's recently said that it wouldn't be the end of the world if we did pull out of the Iran deal as well. So I think we're having a lot of voices trying to push President Trump and staying in it, but I think reasonably it wouldn't be the end of the world as Condoleezza Rice.
They could just give him information because he seems to want to do what he wants to
Dream
do.
big.
Yeah. Dream big.
North Korea lashing out at the U.S. ahead of planned summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. The regime's news agency says Washington is, quote, misleading public opinion by claiming that U.S.-led sanctions pressured the regime to make its denuclearization pledge. And it warns the U.S. not to deliberately provoke the North by deploying strategic assets in South Korea and raising human rights issues. Just days ago, President Trump said he's been taking steps to reduce tensions with the regime. Watch.
We're really doing well with North Korea. We're really doing well. Remember, they said, oh, it's going to be terrible. They were actually saying 3 months ago, when the rhetoric was rather sharp. Do we agree? I won't use the rhetoric now. Now I'm trying to calm it down a little bit. So I'm not going to use the rhetoric.
No rhetoric. All right, so let's talk about this, because Kim Jong-un is essentially a sociopath.
Totally.
He's throwing a tantrum like a child who's had his big wheel taken away, and the big wheel is the big guns. That's his nuclear program. It's not a surprise that they are pushing back in this way through the state-run news agency, but does it actually, is this the sort of volley that we should expect leading up to the summit, or is this problematic?
Well, the fact that there had been more of it, quite frankly, sort of surprises me. Because, of course, you would expect this. And you're exactly right. You know, Kim Jong-un is a tyrant, and you can't trust a word he says. And that's why, you know, if you're going to send anybody into negotiations with a lunatic like this, it's good to have somebody like Donald Trump. I have a lot more faith in him than I would, say, John Kerry going into those negotiations. And the reason is because, as we saw with Iran, that he didn't address the things that we care most about. He gave them bundles and bundles of money, and then billions more. Literally.
Not even metaphorical bundles.
Exactly, all of which is funding their terror efforts around the world. And I do believe that Donald Trump will walk away if he doesn't get what he wants. And I believe that he will go in there and genuinely try to drive a real good bargain.
Can I ask you a question? Because you've got diplomacy in your family.
I've lived over in those neck of the woods for a number of years.
And through your dad, of course, ambassador. So when you look at what has been accomplished so far, it still is far ahead of anything we've seen.
Yeah. It's historic. I mean, we should all take a step back and realize where we are at this moment. The fact that North and South Korea, that Kim Jong-un stepped foot on South Korean soil the first time in decades. I mean, that is a huge deal. You also have to remember what's going on in the head of Kim Jong-un, right? Because in his mind, of course he's not wanting to give President Trump credit for this happening. In his mind, he has accomplished what his dad and his granddad have been pushing for years and years, and that is developing their nuclear program, right? So now he says, we can hang with the big guys as a nuclear country. So we are now able to open up to the West. They still want to remain that strong voice and strong power. So the president's got to be careful.
Can you do both?
Leading up. I think you can.
I mean,
but I do think the president
does it really matter if it was the sanctions and the pressure
it
and,
does
and
to
the threat
him.
of nuclear annihilation? I mean,
it does to Kim Jong-un.
And to Donald Trump.
So let's say we give him that one. Let's say, oh, okay, Kim, whatever you want. You can have it on your terms. But Burger King all the way.
But it's also the optics back in North Korea, too, for Kim Jong-un. It's the political optics there for him. He has to save face heading into this conversation with President Trump.
Can we just give them this one? It's an interesting...
Yeah, no, you did it because you're so smart and logical, and you love Swiss cheese, and obviously that was the...
Nobody likes Swiss cheese.
President Trump weighing in on one of 3 critical GOP Senate primaries tomorrow, which could eventually determine the balance of power in Washington. Candidates in those races have been trying to align themselves with the president and his agenda, but will that strategy work in the general election? We'll debate and discuss in a moment. Stay right here.
Welcome back. President Trump weighing in on one of 3 GOP Senate primary races happening tomorrow. The president tweeting, "To the great people of West Virginia, we have together a really great chance to keep making a big difference. Problem is, Don Blankenship, currently running for Senate, can't win the general election in your state. No way. Remember Alabama, vote Representative Jenkins or Attorney General Morrissey." Blankenship telling Fox News that he's still going to win. Republicans are closely watching these primaries in West Virginia, Indiana, and Ohio. The president won all 3 states, and they represent the GOP's best hopes of unseating incumbent Democrats. So, Charlie, I'm hearing that Don Blankenship is actually up by 2 in West Virginia right now. Karl Rove has said that if Don Blankenship wins, Republicans can kiss West Virginia goodbye. Is he right?
I don't know if he's right about that. I think that a lot of the people that are predicting that Don Blankenship absolutely can't win West Virginia have been wrong about a lot of things. And let's also not forget, in 2012, it was a convicted felon who was in prison who won 40% of the vote in West Virginia while in prison against in the Democratic primary against Barack Obama. So West Virginia, predicting how West Virginia is going to vote is not an easy thing. But there is a real problem that Republicans are having drafting off of the Trump off of Trump's coattails. And the big problem is that you know the anti-Washington sentiment that got Trump into the White House is still out there. And so in a place like West Virginia, they wind up going behind a guy like Blankenship.
West Virginia is a really interesting state because you think since about 2000, it's really been trending more and more red. The only reason Joe Manchin is, he's been kind of the main Democrat there because he is very much in the middle. Now, he didn't support the tax cuts, right? He didn't support repealing Obamacare. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays in the general. But I do think he's still a very popular, he was governor of that state, that if he were to lose as a Democrat of West Virginia, I think that could be the beginning of West Virginia completely being red.
Well, you know, I've interviewed Joe Manchin, and he is a strong candidate, right? So Don Blankenship been to jail, right? Probably not the best to have a candidate who spent time in jail. And
Did you see his campaign ad?
Well, I did.
Cocaine Mitch? Come on, man.
But so do you agree
I don't care where you're from. He looks like he's nervous about something.
But do you agree with Charlie's assessment that, you know, perhaps it doesn't matter who wins the primary in the state?
I think it does matter because I think, you know, unfortunately for Republicans, there are still going to be very independent-minded voters in a place like West Virginia. It's different than every other state. And you know, they deserve to put their own candidates and nominees forth. I get that. Still, Don Blankenship looks nuts.
So can I just for a second revisit what we saw in PA 18, District 18, with Connor Lamb? If Joe Manchin decides to go even just a little bit farther right, Republicans are going to have a mess on their hands potentially come the midterms.
Yeah.
Right? So you can say it doesn't matter who goes up against. You've got to be looking at who can beat Joe Manchin at this point, regardless of whose coattails are being, what tweets are being. You've got to be looking at it that way. And, you know, the Attorney General, I don't know, maybe. These other men in the race who benefited from the president's tweet potentially, maybe. But who can really beat a Joe Manchin who might go a little bit right like a Connor Lamb? That becomes a candidate that might not be real down the road, but it's real in this race.
Yep. Right. That's spot on.
All right. Well, some counties in Illinois are taking a tip from liberals declaring sanctuary for gun owners. Will it work? And is it the right way to handle this issue? Stay tuned.
Controversial move by some rural counties in southern Illinois declaring themselves sanctuary counties for gun rights. So they are pushing back against threats to target their Second Amendment rights and taking a cue from liberal sanctuary city policies that refuse to enforce federal immigration laws. The authors behind these resolutions admit their move is largely symbolic, but they are making a point. So this is really interesting, Charlie. You have Republicans who are basically sending a message to Democratic lawmakers who are pushing for more gun control in Illinois. Question is this hypocritical for Republicans who have been so negative, so anti-sanctuary city, sanctuary state, to now say, we're going to do the very same thing about laws that we don't want to abide by?
Sure, it's hypocritical, but this is this slippery slope. You start doing this with immigration laws and start claiming that that duly passed, enacted immigration laws that are on the books and have been on the books for a long time, we're not going to obey those laws. Why don't you do it for everything? You could do it for gun laws. You could do it for, I don't know, whatever. And it's a terrible thing.
Should we just do away with sanctuary cities, Kennedy? I mean, what's the answer here?
That would be a start.
I don't know, man. I think we have to find the difference between a constitutional right. You know, this is something that is enshrined in the Bill of Rights for a very good reason. And it's a very important issue for many Americans who feel that it is their duty in order to protect themselves and their families. And self-defense is critical, especially in places like Illinois, where parts of Illinois have been, you know, riddled with the type of crime that you really don't see except for once in a generation. And they want this phase to pass, and they want to do it by being able to protect themselves. So that's the difference. And, you know, our immigration policy is screwed up right now it's completely upended, and Republicans and Democrats have to figure out a way to have comprehensive immigration so you don't have willy-nilly policies in states, counties, and cities.
Well, my understanding, too, is that this is happening in some of the rural counties in the state, and I think this really underscores a point that I've been making, is that the gun control debate isn't just right versus left, it's rural versus urban. And I was looking at some Pew research that was super interesting, just breaking down, of course, you know, your thoughts are, which is true, that more rural individuals have guns than those that live in urban areas, but also the fact that you've got, you know, the bulk of the rural individuals have owned a gun before the age of 18, and that breakdown is so different than individuals living in the urban areas as well. And so I think it really underscores this deep divide in the country on the gun divide, solely based on, you know, what kind of area you live in.
Well, and, you know, when you look at the vice chairman of the board, and this is a rural area, Eppington County in Illinois, and what he said was that they're just turning the wording on its head because it provides you such a rich talking point at that point. I mean, the word's already out there, sanctuary, and it does kind of flip it. But with what Kennedy's saying, do you need a sanctuary for something that's constitutionally protected? And do you go down kind of a dicey road if you treat it like that?
But I mean, and what really should happen is that these laws should be challenged on the grounds of constitutionality, and the Supreme Court has been very vocal that there are very, very few limits that you can ever put on this stuff because, as you say, it is a constitutional right, and you can protect yourself, you can protect your family, and you can protect your neighbors.
I think there's a big difference in talking sanctuary city when it comes to immigration and it comes to your gun rights.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how this one plays out. I think you make a great point about
especially for all those people who say that they have a right to be here illegally or not, and they want those sanctuary cities, like what they're doing in Chicago with Rahm Emanuel. They want those to be here, but that's not that's not a right. That's not a constitutional right. So I get it. I get the talking point with the words and all that kind of stuff, and what's kitschy and hashtagable and all that, but the issues are very different.
All right, we'll see how that one plays out in Illinois. More Outnumbered in just a moment. Stick with us.